Well, as you can see, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Steve Barclay, joins us now. Minister, lovely to have you in the studio this morning. Let us be fair, the past 24 hours in terms of COVID news have been worrying for an awful lot of people. Let us start with large chunks of the South East moving into Tier 3. What is the evidence basis for that? When you look at the numbers, it does appear, there have been rises in and around London, but the driving factor behind this decision appears to be the spiralling cases in Kent and Essex.
Well, it is worrying, and particularly for those businesses, many businesses that worked so hard to make their premises COVID secure as well, and we're very conscious of that. But if you look at the hospitalisations, which were up 25% last week, if you look at the infection rate across the board, 20% increase. London, as a region, now has the highest rate of infection. So that is why the Chief Medical Officer and the SAGE Committee have had the concerns they've had, and it was important that the government moved quickly to respond to that spike in infections.
Of course, there are parts of the country which have barely been out of Tier 3 or the equivalent, for many, many months now. But there will be people in London waking up this morning going, look, what was the point of the last lockdown? If within a matter of days we are once again seeing the restrictions increase, we are seeing businesses not be allowed to operate.
Well, it hasn't been the same as previous lockdowns. If you look at the schools have stayed open, non-essential retail continues to be open. So we have sought to respond to the concerns to enable not just school pupils who were particularly hard hit when schools were closed, not just in terms of their learning, but their development, their mental health, which were affected. So it's been important to keep schools open during this period. That's also important, of course, for parents as well of children at school, because it impacts on their jobs and their livelihoods as well. So we have had to take tough measures, but at the same time, looking at the data, looking at the increase, particularly in hospitalisations, that is what has led to this measure.
Just as regards schools, given that you've mentioned it, it does appear that the government is on something of a collision course with City Hall at the moment. I mean, can you confirm, is the government ready to use legal measures to force those schools to remain open, those schools which we've heard in the past couple of days are to be closed?
Well, I think the vast majority of teachers has responded brilliantly and worked heroically during this period. 99% of schools have been open. It is important, if you look at the advice from the Chief Medical Officer, that we keep our schools open. That is important to the development of children, but I say has a wider economic impact as well. There is the issue with Greenwich, I recognise.
Are you going to take legal action to force the schools to open?
Well, the Education Secretary being clear, we want to keep schools open and we will look at what measures are required to do so. Obviously, there's a specific issue with Greenwich, which has happened yesterday evening. But we are keen. Schools will finish this week for Christmas, so most schools will finish on Thursday. I'm going to have one more go.
Are you going to use the legal methods that are available to you to force those schools which are closing in Greenwich to remain open? We have heard so often from this government that it is a priority that kids remain in school, that the negative effect that many children will have experienced because of the long period that they spent away from school during the first lockdown is evidence of that. So are you or are you not going to compel these schools to open?
Well, the Education Secretary has written to Greenwich to require them to write to schools. It is important, as I say, that schools stay open. Of course, we'll keep our options open in terms of the legal powers, but the vast majority of schools have stayed open. The vast majority of teachers have worked throughout this period to ensure that education continues even when the schools were closed. But we do think it is important that schools stay open. That is the medical advice from the Chief Medical Officer, and we'll use whatever powers are necessary to do so.
How concerned should we be about this new strain of COVID-19? I mean, frankly, from text messages and phone calls that I received from friends and family yesterday, there are any number of people who are really worried about it.
I think it is concerning, particularly in respect to whether the spread of transmission is quicker with this strain.
I mean, is there any evidence for that? Because it wasn't entirely clear from what the Health Secretary said yesterday. There was a suggestion that it might have led to the rise in cases in the South East, but no data was offered.
Well, we're investigating, and the Port and Down are working on that at pace. We have some of the best scientists in the world in the UK, and they will be working on this. What the Chief Medical Officer said, which hopefully will give viewers some comfort, is in terms of the vaccine, it would be very surprising if the vaccine was impaired in terms of dealing with this virus, but this strain of the virus. But the concern is in terms of the spread and whether the increase we've seen in London and the South East is linked to that particular strain, and that's what we're investigating.
I do want to read you the words of Emeritus Professor of Bacteriology at Aberdeen University, Hugh Pennington. He's written in the Mail this morning, "There is nothing in itself alarming about a virus mutating. We get mutations in viruses all the time, coronavirus, in fact, less than others. If I were being unkind to our Health Secretary, I would accuse him of having launched a new Project Fear." I mean, at the time that the Health Secretary was talking about us all being rather more careful as we edge towards Christmas, it does seem that the emergence of this new virus is being used to make us think a lot more about the way in which we behave.
I don't think that's fair. I'm not going to trade scientific qualifications with someone as learned as that. The point is that the Chief Medical Officer, the Chief Scientific Advisor, scientists at Portondown are looking at this strain. There is a concern that has contributed to the fast spread of the infection in recent weeks, but we're investigating it, and hopefully it will turn out to be less of a concern than feared. But the key issue is there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have the vaccine, 800,000 now already of the Pfizer vaccine in the UK. We're deploying that at pace. And I think for many of your viewers, that is the light at the end of the tunnel. That's why we need people to continue to adhere to the social distancing restrictions, because there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Can we talk about Christmas then? In your mind, is there any possibility that this government will look again about the Christmas window, given the rate of infection is where it is, given that, in 8 days' time, after 8 days of, tier 3 conditions here in London, hundreds of thousands of people will be travelling to various parts of the country to see their loved ones and potentially taking COVID-19 with them. You can't tell me that this doesn't remain under review.
But all things are always kept under review. But there's the balance.
So Christmas could be cancelled.
No, there's a balance to be struck. Many families have not seen each other all year. It is important for people's well-being, for their mental health. We don't want to criminalise people for coming together as a family over Christmas. But people shouldn't misinterpret what the guidelines say. It's not saying that people must go and see family. It's saying that where families want to see each other, they won't be criminalised for doing so. But it's important people do the minimum that is possible. So people will make their own judgments, as families will make their own judgments. I won't be seeing my parents over Christmas, so people will make their own judgments on these. But we don't want to criminalise families for coming together at Christmas. And we must recognise it's been a difficult year, and many families will want to see each other over the Christmas period.
I understand all of that, but it is confusing to me this morning, given that in 24 hours we will be in tier 3 here in London, that the advice from government for people in tier 3, the highest tier, let's not forget, is make your own minds up about this. I mean, would your advice to me be to travel home to Scotland this Christmas?
Our advice has always been to the British public to exercise their common sense, which they have done. And we've had debates in the past as to whether every single aspect of guidance has been prescribed. And we've tried to treat the British public as grown-ups and ensure that people deploy their common sense. What we're saying with Christmas is people should do the minimum that is possible, but they will make their own judgments as families. And we don't want to criminalise families for coming together over the Christmas period, but people should exercise the minimum that they're able to. And that's what the Chief Medical Officer set out in the press conference yesterday. And I think that's what the vast majority of families will do. They'll respond responsibly and they will do what is right for their families.
Even the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Advisor both will concede that this Christmas window will lead to a rise in infection.
Well, any social contact will lead to a rise in infection, but at the same time we want rules that are complied with, and we want rules that also balance the other health impacts. The other health impacts in terms of loneliness, in terms of mental health, in terms of people that haven't seen loved ones for a long period of time. So people do need to exercise their judgment, but we should trust people to do so.
This from the Sun's editorial this morning, I think, sums up what a lot of people will be feeling. The government cannot issue scary warnings about a new type of virus, close London and large areas around it, then let the public loose for 5 days over Christmas and risk infecting the entire nation.
Well, I think that's
could not design a better strategy to trigger a third wave in the darkest depths of winter.
So I think that misrepresents the position. The position is not that we're scrapping the tiering system for 5 days, that we're letting people loose. What we're saying is within the family, 3 households can come together. That's the limit of the flexibility that is offered. I think it's been mischaracterised as almost a tier 0, that we're scrapping restrictions in their entirety. That is not the case. The point is saying that there will be families where people want to come together with their parents over the Christmas period. They need to do so responsibly. I think the vast majority of families will do so because they want to look after their own loved ones, especially any elderly parents. So let's trust families to make those judgments, but it's not scrapping, as that might suggest, the tiering system or throwing the restrictions away. That is not what it's saying.
Can we therefore rule out a lockdown come January? It appears to me pretty much not.
Well, we've got the tiering system. Obviously, we're responding to the data, responding to the infections. That's why, in terms of London and the South East, that's been stronger. But we're talking about this from a London perspective. We need to be very conscious that many other parts of the country, as a northerner myself, I'm conscious that many other parts of the country have been in these tougher restrictions for a long period as well. So we need to get the virus down. That's why people need to comply with the regulations, act responsibly, but also reflect that Christmas is a special time and families will want to come together for that period, but for a very limited period.
Just a word before you go on Brexit. I mean, we almost got there, didn't we, to the end of the interview without mentioning it. Where are we this morning? It does appear still the two sticking points, level playing field and fishing, remain the issues.
Well, those are the key issues, and you're quite right, they have been for some time. The discussions are ongoing, as you know. I think, the fundamentals remain the same. It is in both sides' interests to have a deal. That is what the Prime Minister has committed to. What the UK has set out, a very reasonable ask in line with precedent, in line with what the EU have offered in previous free trade agreements. And that's what the negotiating team continue to work towards.
Your colleague, Sir Roger Gales, is on the programme just a little bit later on. You'll be aware that he has said, look, if the Prime Minister does not get a trade deal, given all the promises that he's made, 1,000,000 to 1 chance that we won't be leaving with a deal and all the rest of it, that he should do the honourable thing and step aside. Roger's got a point, doesn't he?
No, I mean, Sir Roger is a very senior colleague, is one I respect hugely. But on this, I do disagree with him. I mean, firstly...
I thought you might.
I think many people would. I think, firstly, the Prime Minister is battling for Britain, is going out to secure the best deal. And whether there is a deal is not simply down to the actions of the Prime Minister. It needs the EU to move, to respond to the precedent that they've given to other countries. And I'm sure Roger would really respect that.
Stephen Barclay, lovely to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being with us.